I think especially in 2026, clearly Trump has decided he's going to change everything. He's gone for Venezuela. He's going for Greenland. God knows what will happen with his politics about Ukraine. I don't know. Gaza is forgotten. I think he has decided that not only Venezuela will go, but Iran will go.
As I'm recording this, Iran looks like it's spiraling out of control again. 2 days ago already, CNN reported 554 deaths since the protests began about 15 days ago, almost as many as during the year-long unrest of 2022-23. And true to form, Trump seems to live by the rule never waste a good crisis, openly floating yet another strike on Iran. When do you hit an enemy? Well, when he's on his knees. But even without those protests, Iran was never going to be safe from American intervention. That's what I'm discussing today with Yassamine Mather. And don't make the mistake of thinking this soft-spoken, razor-smart woman is an easy pushover. Yes, today she's an Oxford scholar working on classified programming projects. But when we rewind the tape, we find that as a young woman, she volunteered to help build an anti-government radio station in the mountains of Iran, at a time when getting caught was more than just dangerous. It was potentially as fatal as it would be today. More on this fascinating story in the previous interview. The link's in the description. But this interview today is about the unrests, some call it protests, others call it uprisings, now gripping Tehran and cities across the country. What happens next? Who is really driving it? And how much of what we are seeing is organic and how much is engineered? But before we dive in, a quick invitation if you want to go further than conversations like this will allow. If you're interested in the bigger, messier picture of global power, Washington, Moscow, Beijing, the Middle East, that's what my Substack is for. Long-form investigative pieces on international shifts, narrative warfare, information control, and the way global actors collide and collude on the world stage. And if you care about what all of this means for Europe, not as an afterthought, but as a center of gravity in its own right, that's where my work on Medium comes in. There I look at Europe from a Europe-first perspective, the virtual collapse of its strategic autonomy, its blind spots, and the distorted stories Europeans are told about their own place in the world. So if this interview sparks questions, don't stop there. Pick the lens you prefer, global on Substack, European on Medium, to receive weekly updates that follow the questions to wherever they're not supposed to go. Yassamine Mather, what a pleasure having you again. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you very much for inviting me.
My pleasure. To give a little bit of context to the viewers, we spoke not so long ago where I had the chance to record an interview at your office in the Oxford University, where you are a scholar. And today, very early, I dared to ping you, and you responded immediately in regards to having this conversation today, which is about Iran. Now, I have Twitter next to me. There's everything Iran, 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 the Great Revolution. I mean, the first question would be, of course, is that it? Will this mass uprising be the fall of the Iranian regime?
Very difficult question. I really don't know. I think we are, it would be too early to predict this. It might happen, but people have said this for the last 40 years repeatedly, and it hasn't happened. So we have to wait. I think the size of the demonstrations originally wasn't very big. It has grown in size in the last 2-3 days. I also think that the spread in the first few days was unprecedented. So after the protest in the bazaar, suddenly we had more than 27 provinces. The country has only got 31 provinces, but 27 provinces where there were reports of protests. So the spread was very fast. Numbers were lower than 2023 demonstrations, but the numbers have since grown. And so there seems to be no end to the current wave of protest, despite the fact that the scene has changed. So it started off with the government trying to talk to the merchants of the bazaar, making concessions on some economic issues, admitting that there were problems. Even the supreme leader admitted that some people had genuine fair demands, but things changed. Now, things changed in twofold. One, because the demonstrations inevitably don't stay economic. They grow in a country where there's been a dictatorship. The demonstrations became far more political. And as they became more political, we saw suppression, we saw the army and the retaliation of the demonstrators. So it became quite violent. The government is blaming that the protesters were setting fire to this, that, or the other. I would say, well, once people can't demonstrate freely, that does happen anyway. But on the other hand, the numbers of those who've been killed, we're not sure of. I think there is a level of exaggeration by opposition groups, and there is a level of undermining the numbers by the government. Last night's report, this is after the internet was shut down, the last night's reports show violence was quite strong by the government forces. I do read that hospital doctors are saying that our hospital was overwhelmed. However, we can't check any of this. And given the number of fake news I have read and seen in the last few days about Iran, we have to be very careful because we don't know. This doctor could be somebody in London or Paris phoning a TV station with a changed number that looks like an Iran number. We all know how to do that. And fooling gullible reporters, but maybe it's true.
Indeed, it's very difficult to say what's right and wrong. Again, I have Twitter open here. Yeah, there is, of course, an interest on both sides. One side, of course, wants to increase the violence and the casualties, and the other side, the opposite. Now, what I also saw is that there are coming voices. Again, we need to define where are the voices. I see the voices in Western news outlets that give a platform to the son of the ousted Shah Reza Pahlavi. Do you think he has any chances? I mean, my information is that he's not. I can't even say popular. He's not popular at all. He's not recognized in Iran. What's the true story here?
Okay, so I think there are people who hate him and some people who do like him, in Iran, that is. But there has been a very sustained, a very organized campaign to present him as an alternative by Mossad, and to a certain extent by the Trump administration. But the Trump administration is very clear it's not backing just Reza Pahlavi, right? So the Trump administration, my understanding is following a three-line policy. It gives some support to Reza Pahlavi. It gives some support to Kurdish groups that want separation. But it's currently actually very busy negotiating with parts of the regime in what I would call smoother transfer of power from one part of the regime to the other. So Trump is not as much pro-Reza Pahlavi as Mossad is. Mossad is fully behind Reza Pahlavi. He went to Tel Aviv a couple of years ago. He's met Netanyahu. He actually holds the Israeli flag, the Zionist flag, with his own royalist flag. So he's very much a Zionist, a pro-Israeli Mossad person. Why do I say they've actively supported him? Earlier last week, there were many demonstrations where, because of the publicity by the Persian-speaking media, one of which is a mass TV, satellite TV that Israel broadcasts to Iran, the demonstrators were actually shouting no to Shah, no to Rahbar, they meant Khamenei, no to dictatorship, right? Now, the TV station has two TV stations. One is just a YouTube channel, one is a satellite channel. These were repeatedly showing these films with people shouting, "Long live the Shah." Now, this made people so angry that I was bombarded with messages on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram by people who were actually in those demonstrations showing the two reels. So they were showing what they were doing because they'd taken it on their phone. And they were saying, these bastards are lying. We didn't say long live the Shah, right? However, fake news is, if you like, exposed by some people, but it does have its effect. And I think what they did has had its effect, because some demonstrators in the last 2 days in Iran actually think he's a possible alternative, right? So here you have fake news actually affecting real news, in my opinion, if it's true that, because we still don't know. I mean, these are evening photos. BBC Persian, BBC English is publicizing as if this was the only slogan. We need to wait, because they also publicized the Mossad TV one and then realized that was a very stupid mistake and had to stand back, right? So we are in a very dangerous time when lies can become truths and we don't know. My own assessment is that there are people who think that his grandfather, not his father, his grandfather was the man who, if you like, was responsible for progress in Iran, for a level of secularization. I think his grandfather has some kudos among some people, especially because, again, there's been a lot of nostalgia about how he developed Iran and so on. That does not necessarily mean that a playboy who has done absolutely nothing in the last 44 years to ingratiate himself with the Iranian people, who, when interviewed, says, "I'm not sure even if I will go back to Iran," right? Is actually someone that people want as a ruler. As a figurehead for demonstrations, yes, probably.
Exactly. That's also why I'm asking, because I saw those clips that you're referring to, where you have the narrative like this pro Shah or pro monarchy or pro grandson of the Shah slogans over and over in Western media. Yeah. And there is, of course, no surprise that he is aligned with Israel, because Shah Reza Pahlavi himself was closely aligned with Israel. There's no surprise there. So that leads me to my next question, of course. I mean, it's very tempting to view all those incidents that are happening right now as isolated incidents, yeah. And we discussed it this morning. So I'm getting up now every morning thinking, what else happened, yeah, overnight? What Venezuela here, and I mean, it's just crazy, yeah. So in regards to Israel and the U.S., there is, of course, a overall picture emerging that changes the global order. And Iran, in my limited, in my modest opinion, and again, it's an opinion, fits perfectly, also time-wise, in that picture, right? So we have the Syria is gone. All the proxies from Iran are either gone or significantly weakened, right? So country by country, we have those, Wesley Clark from 1997, I think it was, 7 countries in 5 years, right? So Iran was the last one on the list, and now it's just hanging on a thread. So if you look at this from a geopolitical high-level perspective, what do you foresee here?
Okay, I think you are right. I think, especially in 2026, clearly Trump has decided he's going to change everything. He's gone for Venezuela, he's going for Greenland. God knows what will happen with his politics about Ukraine, I don't know. Gaza is forgotten, is back, no one cares. All these people died. There was supposedly a peace. Every day I see people dying. There's no change there. I think he has decided that not only Venezuela will go, but Iran will go. Now, the question is that, as most people have said during the last week, Iran is not Venezuela. It's a huge country. The government has been there for more than 4 decades. It has roots, it has bases, and so on. And it's difficult to dislodge it, because politically and economically, it covers the entire country. It controls things. That is why I don't know what happened in Venezuela. I don't think any of us know exactly what happened, but there are talks that some negotiations were done to allow this to happen. There are strong rumors, I don't know if they're true or not, I have to add, but there are strong rumors that some negotiations is currently going on between the United States, intermediary Oman, with sections of the Iranian government. Now, who these sections are they the reformists? Are they the very conservatives? Is it the Revolutionary Guards? Is it the army? I have no idea. But there are talks that these negotiations are paving the way for a handover of power. Now, if you look at it in this way, there are some conditions I have to say. First of all, I think sections of the conservative clergy will not go that easily. So whoever is doing these negotiations will have a tough job on their hands. But if they do manage to do it, then yes, you have the Iran issue resolved, and that has consequences, not just for Iran, where I think in the long term, the US-Israeli policy is to divide the country into various parts and reduce its power in the region. This would be good for Saudi Arabia, it would be good for Turkey. On the other hand, both Turkey and Saudi Arabia and Qatar and all the other countries are concerned about the consequences of a breakup of Iran, because it can create civil wars and so on. So I'm not sure where they are right now, but there are advantages, definitely for Israel, if Iran is divided. And my guess is that the Trump administration has decided 2026 to be the year of absolute change. No soft talking, no gradual process. I think we saw it in Venezuela. We see it in ISIS' attitude towards opponents or defenders of migrants in the US. I mean, the killing in Minneapolis is not out of, it really shows this is it. These people are going for the full blast, whatever, Trumpism. And in that way, let me add that the protests in Iran started very genuinely and inevitably. I mean, you can't have a currency dropping every day and then reaching a situation where people can't afford anything, right? However, even that situation, you can't say happened out of the blue. If I may, I want to explain how this whole thing occurred.
Sure.
So first of all, you have to accept that when a country imposes sanctions, this is not soft war, it's a kind of war, right? So the United States, the European Union have imposed sanctions on Iran's Islamic Republic. Some of it is 40 years old, some of it is 20 years old. Some of them are since the Trump first administration, where he walked out of the JCPOA, the nuclear deal. Yeah. What happens with sanctions is that a certain group close to the government become more powerful. In a country like Iran, how does that work? And here, the fault of the Iranian government is also obvious. In Iran, there are there are 3 or 4, but 2 main types of exchange rate. The official exchange rate, was on the first day of the demonstration 28,000 2 months for $1. The unofficial market rate was 140,000 2 months, right? So the official rate is available to the IRGC, Iran's Revolutionary Guard Command, to certain ministries, to certain individuals. It is supposed to be for medicine, essential food items, but only essential, and for security necessities, right? So these are the category of people who benefit. Now, obviously, it went a lot further than that. People associated with centers of power, with senior ayatollahs, with senior ministers, with IRGC commanders, bought goods, any good, including banana, for example, or apples or whatever, with the official rate, sold it at the market rate, making a 5 times profit. So the huge wealth that we saw some of these people having was no accident. Imagine you buy something 28, sell it at 140. You've already made, you don't even need to add any other profit. You've made enough profit, yeah? So that's why we saw this unbelievable wealth amongst government people and people associated with the Revolutionary Guards, with senior ayatollahs. People used to call them the sons of the ayatollahs, sons and daughters of ayatollahs, as the people who were very rich. Yeah? The poor people who are buying this are getting poorer every day. Last year, the same dollar at some stage was 75,000 2 months, right? The free market one, the one people actually pay. And so goods were rising in price unbelievably to a stage where the bazaar couldn't even sell. There is no purchasing power amongst ordinary people to buy these goods. So inevitably, they protested, ordinary people protested, and so. So this endemic corruption, this corruption that covered every aspect, is one item that people hate. But also the denial of this corruption, the denials that you have this system which is constantly making the poor poorer and the rich richer. What do countries do when they have a currency collapse? I'm sure you know. They liquidate their reserves. We had this in Britain. Wonderful Liz Truss did this, and the Bank of England, the central bank, did. Iran can't liquidate reserves because its reserves are all blocked. They are all frozen, right? So in a way, the country has no way out of that. The country has also just come out of a 12-day war, so there is serious implications after a war like that. They claim the nuclear industry hasn't been touched. I think it's difficult to believe that there wasn't major damage. Maybe it didn't destroy all of it. I'm sure it didn't, but you have to admit that's a disadvantage. The missiles the program is progressing, but again, you have to think how far. And the threat from Israel is constant. When Netanyahu went to visit Trump just before the new year, everyone was saying he's gone to get a green card for an attack on Iran. I think he went and he got a green card for helping what is happening now. Yeah. So the protests are genuine. Ordinary people are angry, but there are a lot of other players as well. Now, Khamenei likes to say, oh, it's all a conspiracy and so on. That's deluding. If he really believes that, he's deluding himself. He's extremely unpopular. People say, you're supposed to be our guardian. He's supposed to be the guardian of the nation. And he presided over decades of corruption. So either you don't know, in which case you are incompetent, or you know and you're part of the corruption. Not personally, but you're overseeing it. And then we have, if you like, the continued incompetence. So the government suddenly decided to make some changes, like they tried to reduce the two rates of the dollar to one rate. In the middle of an uprising, in the middle of various other foreign threats and so on, you can't do this kind of economic reforms. A, it's too late and probably too little. But also, it actually reduced the rate of the market dollar for a few days, and then it shot back up. In fact, it's now more than 140,000 to months when the protests started. So you've created economic chaos in the middle of a protest because of because of bad policies. I'm not sure, and the result is where we are now.
Yes, and one thing that I would like to highlight what you just said, never waste a good crisis. Now, in one of my books here, I have the autobiography of Herman Roosevelt. I think was the grandson of the president, who brags in his book about how he and his cronies kind of organized the coup against the Mossadegh, right? So in Iran, this is not forgotten. So if I see this here, and then I hear on the Western channels all those pro-Shah chants, I think they're clearly, I mean, yes, this is a popular uprising, yeah, but it's definitely utilized by multiple fractions pro-Israel, in a way that benefits their cause. The question is only how far are they gonna go this time, right?
Well, the demonstrators seem determined to stay on the street, right? Now, the internet is cut, as you know, so we're getting some news. There are people who kept some kind of connections with Starlink, and they are using that. It's illegal, but they are using it. There are people who are phoning or sending pictures with phone, but we don't know. We don't know enough, I would say. My guess is that the government is going for, unlike the first few days, is going for full blast attack on demonstrators. We are hearing of tear gas. We are hearing of real bullets being
Well,
shot.
it's called tear gas, yeah, but we don't really know what kind of gas it is, right?
We
It
don't know.
looks very, I mean, it's a yellowish. I mean, I haven't seen tear gas like that before. I mean, I'm not an expert here, but it looks, I don't know what that really is, what they're shooting at the protesters.
Well, remember that they have developed their own stuff. So they
Yeah.
might not be, because they can't import quite a lot of things.
Mm.
So I assume they've made, and whether that's worse or better, I would imagine it's worse because they would have not, they wouldn't be very careful about how it affects
Mm.
people. But
Mm.
we are hearing of actual shootings.
Yeah.
If the
Especially in the
hospital,
last 2 days.
in the last 2 days, and if the
Yeah.
hospital reports are true, that's also very worrying.
Mm.
Let me add that the propaganda by the supporters of the regime and the regime itself is that on Thursday night, people started setting fire to buses that had just been imported to help transport and so on. I really don't think people deliberately went to set fire to those buses. I think you are in a situation where there's a riot going on, a huge demonstration going on, and you're being fired at and you set fire to things. And I think this kind of language from a government that came to power through a popular uprising, whether they weren't the only participant, but they benefited from a popular uprising, is a bit rich. I
Mm.
would say.
Mm. Now, Trump says if the government of Iran kind of really cracks down on the protesters, I don't know exactly what he said. He will intervene or interfere or whatever. So, what do you think could he possibly do? I mean, seriously, I mean, this is not Venezuela, as you said. It's Iran. That's a different ball game altogether.
Okay, so first he said, if some people are killed, I will interfere, right? And I think his advisor said that very, don't do it
They're
because
already
that will,
dead. They're already dead. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
and that will change everything. In that, if the country is attacked, we saw it in the 12-Day War. Nationalism becomes the overwhelming sentiment, and that's exactly what the government is doing now. It's saying we are under attack. It's the same as the bombings. You have to defend us because we are the country, not because we are good, but we are the country. And so I'm sure his advisor said that. However, I listened to this interview on Fox News that Trump gave, I think Wednesday or Thursday. It's bizarre. He's actually he's actually defending the Islamic Republic. He's saying, of these people who were killed, they weren't killed by the security forces. There was a stampede and they fell under the crowd, right? This is the excuse that the Iranian government is giving. So why is Trump giving this kind of excuse for not interfering? Exactly for the reasons I mentioned earlier. He knows that a military intervention will bring out national sentiments, but also my guess is that he is involved in some negotiations with somebody now, and I'm sure that this is not just ignorant people who don't know what's going on. There are serious people involved, and there are governments involved, such as Oman, maybe Qatar, definitely Oman. And he's pinned his hopes, I think, on those negotiations, smooth transfer of power. I could be wrong. I didn't think so a couple of days ago, but there are too many signs that there is something going on.
If we come one more time back to a high-level geopolitical view, there is, of course, this massive giant looming in the background, which is China. And China is in the middle of America's crosshairs. So I interpret most of the recent happenings as a kind of attempt to further and further isolate China. And this is certainly true for Venezuela. It would be certainly true for Iran. It has been true on a number of other aspects that we have seen developing in the last month, and it goes faster and faster. So, what, as far as you can tell, and I know you are an Iran expert and not a China expert, but what would a, let's call it, fall or a change of government in Iran mean for China, as far as you can tell?
Okay, so China has benefited from very cheap Iranian oil. Right? Because of sanctions, they can buy this at a price that is very low. And for the US, I think even in terms of Venezuela, but definitely in terms of Iran, it's not because the US wants Iranian oil. US wants to control the flow of oil to China and make it very expensive and difficult for China to have cheap oil. So I would argue that that's the policy as it's being followed. It's quite clear neither Greenland nor Venezuela nor Iran have anything to do with these places. The long-term issue is competition between US and China. And here, Russia is too small. It's the second, is not as important. The main issue is China. Now, for China, yes, it will be a problem if the Iranian government fell. But I think that it's not the end of the world. And it's not significant. It's not significant enough. They will make a statement, as they said about Venezuela. They will be deeply shocked if there is a smooth transfer of power where we can see Trump's hand, for example. They will be deeply shocked with the statement by the Chinese Foreign Ministry. But on the other hand, are they going to intervene? I doubt it. Are they going to? They might, if there was obvious signs of an intervention, they might rally the global south in the UN to pass a motion, right, or a statement. But then the US can veto that in the Security Council, so it's not going to have any effect. Is this going to be dramatically difficult for China's economy? Absolutely not. Iran is a very small player in the bigger scene, if you like, as far as China is concerned. China's progress is because of its unprecedented technological advances. China's economic power now is because of the way it's using AI, the way it's using new technology. None of this will be affected by Iran. There is also some interesting articles in recent weeks about China's relationship with Israel. Now, if you like, on the UN scene or in the global south's publicity journals, publicity papers, we don't see that. But quite clearly, China has close relations with Israel, and some of those are on the security level, and therefore, and China doesn't see any reason why it should change those. One of the things that I noticed during the 12-day war was the Iranian government, almost the last day, when the US was also attacking, made an announcement, somebody in the Iranian government, probably the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, that Iran has managed to purchase some weaponry from China, right? Within seconds of that statement, the denial was issued by the Israeli embassy in Tel Aviv. And what that tells me is that for China, relations with Israel are very important. They did not want to jeopardize that. They were very quick at that. My guess is, of course, economically, it will have an effect, a negative effect, but it's not something that will, they're not going to lose sleep at losing Iran. I don't think so. And the way they are moving in the global south, it's actually beneficial to them because they say, I mean, look at Trump, he's changed government in Venezuela, he's overthrowing the Islamic Republic. You have no other ally but us. So, if you like, in terms of propaganda, in terms of getting allies, it's not going to do them any harm.
You just said something important that I would like to come back to the global south. But before we do, in isolation, I believe you're right. So Iran, how should I say this, is not on the top of China's list of priorities. But little by little, for example, Venezuela was not an insignificant oil exporter to China. China does, you're right, they have all this technology, but this technology runs on energy. Where's the energy coming from? From countries like Venezuela. I don't have the exact numbers in my head. I believe 60% of Venezuelan oil in the last years went to China. This is not insignificant. So whilst in isolation, yes, China can survive that, yeah. But there's a whole string of these events, right? So it's getting tighter and tighter for China. That's my point, right? I don't know what's next.
You are right. I'm not underestimating that. But remember that they have also made, from what I can understand, unprecedented progress in terms of non-fuel energy production.
Solar panels, yeah.
Solar, but also others. So I'm involved professionally in this, so I know. So data centers require a lot of energy. So AI needs a lot of energy. They've actually built an AI center, quite a huge one, under the water in the ocean somewhere in the Pacific. And obviously, once you're into those kind of areas,
Sorry. Just out of personal curiosity, I have not heard about this. So where's the energy coming? Are you implying they're getting the energy out of renewable energy for those data centers underwater? Because I agree. I agree. AI data centers need a factor more energy than conventional data centers. So where's the energy coming from underwater?
So one of the dreams of, for example, anybody with a huge data center is to have water cooling around the racks, right? So imagine you have a very cold sea temperature automatically going around, coming out, heating the rest of the system. And it's win-win situation. I'm not saying this is replacing cheap oil. I'm saying they haven't put their eggs in one basket, that they are looking at different ways of doing this. And the other issues they followed is to actually build data centers in very, very cold places and use the heat it generates to heat towns, something we are not doing in Europe. We are letting the heat go into the atmosphere.
I'm aware you need about, for every dollar that you invest in hardware in a data center, you need about $4 for cooling. I completely get it, yeah. But that doesn't take away the fact that these data centers, especially AI data centers, still need a massive amount of energy. Yeah. But let's not digress. And maybe it's a good moment to point out that you are how shall I say this? You are very well versed in technology. Maybe give us a brief explanation what you do in Oxford. I'm jumping around a little bit, I know, but we will come back to the
I'm
global
not sure
south, but
if
I
I'm
think it's
allowed
interesting.
to say what I do. I work
Very,
with
very roughly. Yeah.
Yeah, I work with high performance computing,
Yeah.
and so I am well aware of how a data center consumes heat, how the costs actually are very significant. In the last few years, it's been more significant. But I personally don't work with the hardware. I involved in code writing and clearing code and finding errors and installing large packages, software, that kind of.
Yes. I noticed in our last conversation, you must be one of the brightest minds there in Oxford. Okay. Let's go to the global south. You said it. There might be a unexpected consequence for Bush ousting Venezuela's president and taking over the country. We still have to see how he's going to do that, yeah. But let's say other countries in the global south. What's wait, one more thing. So let me think this through. There was the president of Honduras, and I have to be mindful not to make a fool out of myself now, but I believe it was
Colombia.
the president. No, I think it was the president of Honduras who has been pardoned by
Oh,
Trump
yes.
because he was actually convicted and in jail, right? So that for me could be another worrying sign for the global south because it seems like that Trump wants to reinstall all dictatorial regimes in the region, yeah, whilst ousting, let's say, socialist regimes like Maduro's.
You're very right. He was actually convicted. He pardoned him, and then Maduro is accused of being a drug trafficker. In
Exactly.
fact, yeah, and in fact, even before these events, the Trump administration described fentanyl as a weapon of mass destruction. So if you're involved in trafficking of drugs, of this particular drug, you're actually responsible for weapons of mass destruction. I think non-Trump voters in US see all this as a fiasco, as a disaster. I don't think, I hear a
Mm.
lot of US writers, academics, they say this is just unbelievable, especially the contrast between pardoning one and then accepting
Capturing
this.
another one. Yes.
Yeah, yes, it's obvious. Having said that, I think the main question we have to think about is this something new, or is this a more blatant continuation of policies that existed, that other presidents, especially Democrat presidents, hid on gave it a nice wrapping, and Trump is now removed the wrapping and is showing us the real US as it is, right? And I know that the wrapping can have importance. I'm not underestimating the wrapping. But in many ways, US presidents have done this kind of policy against Cuba, against Venezuela, against Nicaragua. The
75 to 80 regime change attempts, whatever, since 1945. 75 to 80. Yeah, it's not a minor.
It's not a minor number.
Yeah.
What Trump is doing is more blatant. It's more obvious. Now, you could say this is continuation of the colonial period. He's gone back to the 19th century. That's one explanation. It's, if you like, why hide it? We are doing it, so let's be open about it. Others say it's actually desperation because of the decline in the US, because of the competition with China. And I was talking to somebody else about this, and I think he rightly pointed out that there is elements of both, that you shouldn't see it as just one or the other. There is an element of nostalgia for the 19th century colonial period, open aggression, no nice language and so on. But on the other hand, there is also a level of making America great again when you realize there is a big competitor out there and America might. We all know there is a decline. The question is, some people see this decline as much more of a short period than in reality it will be. And during the period of decline, hegemon powers become very paranoid and do pretty nasty things. So this decline could last decades. It could be shorter, but this decline could last decades. And a weakened and injured US is what we
More
see.
dangerous. It's more dangerous.
Much more dangerous. I'm sorry, I'm taking too long, but just to give you an example,
please.
We in Iran, the 1950s, early 1950s, people had a lot of illusions about the United States. Right? This was the up-and-coming imperial power, but people in Iran were used to Britain being the colonial power. Britain was the one who controlled Iranian oil. And the US appeared much more pro-development in Iran. Right? It wanted the development of all the countries of that area and the global south, or third world as we used to call them. Even after the 1953 coup, where it was obvious that the US played a very significant role, although UK was also very much involved and pushed US towards that. Even after that, illusions about the United States continued. Why? Because in the mid to late 50s, in the early 60s, US was giving money to Iran. The loans weren't like the IMF loans. It had this thing called, we had something under the Shah, something called سازمان توسعه و برنامه, development and programming, organization for development. And this was to add electricity to all the rural areas, build roads, build train stations, rail lines, and so on. And the US was very much involved in this, mainly because it wanted a capitalist Iran, right? Not a feudal, backward Iran. It wanted a capitalist Iran. But you can see that an imperialist power, colonial, hegemon capitalist power, during certain period, wants construction. That period ended, in my opinion, in the 70s. Not just about Iran, but about the world. And since then, the United States is in this destructive mood. It doesn't care, if half of the Middle East is torched earth. It doesn't care if Libya is now a destroyed country. It doesn't care about Gaza. That's
Libya,
where we are.
Iraq, Syria.
Iraq. So you can name, you name them.
Yeah. So one last time, coming back to the global south. And again, as far as you can comment, I would be concerned myself if I would be a leader in one of those rest of the global South countries. I mean, he already openly talked about Cuba, yeah, but Brazil, all these what shall I call them? Countries that are kind of aligned, non-aligned, changing alliances. So where do you see this? Is the Venezuela, but also the Iran story? Is there potential, let's say, to unify the global South?
Okay, I mean, that will
As far as
depend.
you can tell. As far as you
Yeah,
can
yeah.
tell.
I mean, what you're saying is obvious. So I think every leader, and this includes not just the global south, but Starmer, Macron, Meloni in Europe, and so on. You have to accept that if you diss the United States, if you say something the United States doesn't like under the current administration, and probably this have longer term effect, because remember, even if by miracle some Democrat does come to power in two and a
It's the
half
same
years,
thing. It's the same thing.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's not going to change a lot.
Hmm.
So leaders in these countries have to think they would have to obey the current hegemon power until China takes over, but that's not immediate. Or they can face all sorts of problems, right? And tariff is the least of them. Bankrupting a country is the least of them. They could be easily removed. You know, there could be negotiations with their own ministers organized by Trump to remove them from power. There could be refusing elections, stopping elections, all sorts of things could happen. So yes, there is that danger. Are these countries united enough? Well, not really, because they all put their own national, sometimes regional interests above global interests or human interests. So we will have to see. Will China try and, if you like, increase the strength of the BRICS to confront all of this? I don't think so. I think China has they're very determined. They have a strategy. They want to become the next global power, right? And they will live with problems like these because the ambition is there, the drive is there, the determination is there, and creating a strong global south to oppose America is a diversion. It might slow them down and so on. Having said that, if these regime changes become like a domino effect, right? Where will China get its raw materials? Where will China, how will China deal with its progress in Africa, its progress in other Middle Eastern countries? It has a very good deal with a lot of Middle Eastern countries. So where would it go? So I'm sure they're following all this very carefully, and they will probably use these opportunities to warn these countries that they should be even closer to China in order to survive.
I'm just looking at a couple of recent headlines here. Iran's exiled crown prince rises as a figure in protests. Then Chinese, Russian, and Iranian warships really arrive in South Africa. More than 50 protesters killed in Iran. Lindsey Graham, I mean, that such a dinosaur is still remotely connected to a government, yeah? He said, Trump is gonna kill you to Iranian leader, yeah? Crazy language. Iran's army vows to protect public property as Tehran seeks to quell growing unrests. So we are seeing different perspectives here. And all the while, the protesters are expanding. Heavy presidents in the past, how long did those protesters usually last? I mean, are we looking at days, weeks, months? How?
Okay, the life woman freedom lasted a long time, but it had quite large numbers, and it was suppressed, but it didn't have the spread of this protest, right? So it was much more urban areas. It didn't have the larger numbers. Women were more involved in that. Now it's much more of it started a very masculine protest. Now there are women on the protest, but it's different. I think the longest was the intergovernmental fights of 2009. So when the election of Ahmadinejad was approved, Mousavi was the contender. People thought he should have won. He was, I think, the last hope of the Islamic Republic to survive long term, but rightly or wrongly, they dismissed him. He wasn't going to change much. He was just a reformist, but they didn't allow his election. Those protests lasted months. I would say 6 months, 7 months. So they were long. And at times they were much bigger than these protests. However, they were more reformist in character, in that at no time, at least he didn't allow his supporters to challenge the supreme leader. So it was a different type of demonstration. But they did say, "You've stolen our vote." And ordinary people, even then, this was 2009, were giving the slogan, "Death to dictator." But he was too soft, too reformist to do much with it.
One last question before we end. I saw some clips on social media where they apparently burned and torched and toppled all those statues from Qasem Soleimani, who was killed incidentally also on the 3rd of January, but in 2020. So first of all, is this genuine? And number two, if it is, why? I mean, is he not an Iranian, or was he not an Iranian hero, kind of?
Okay, so I think people do change their minds. When he was killed, I think we did see genuine demonstrations by ordinary people. I don't know. I'm sure some statues of Soleimani have been brought down. Some have been, people are burning the picture of Khamenei. Some people are actually burning the picture of Reza Pahlavi as well, next to burning the picture of Khamenei. Did it happen in every city? I don't know. I think we have to be very careful, because these are very strange pictures we are seeing. There's a lot of fake audio, fake video, and definitely fake pictures. So we don't know. But I think the anger is there, and the anger is against anyone that the leadership wants to promote as their figurehead. And in that, there is the slogan, and I don't approve of this slogan, but there is this slogan, we don't care about Gaza, we don't care about Lebanon, we care about Iran. And that's quite a common slogan, people say. I think it's the fault of the Islamic Republic that this slogan has become popular, because it claims it's doing a lot for Lebanon, for Gaza. It hasn't done enough for Gaza, for Lebanon, it did more because of Hezbollah being a Shia organization, but for Gaza, it hasn't done as much as it claims. And ordinary people in hunger, in difficult economic conditions, when Israel keeps saying the government is spending all its money in Gaza, blame Gaza for their own poverty. And this is deliberate colonial, imperialist, Zionist policy. But it has clients because of constant bombardment. If you open your TV and every day Mossad TV tells you all your money is being spent in Gaza, you don't follow it. You don't follow the truth that Iran probably spent some money for Islamic Jihad, but definitely didn't pay Hamas. Hamas's money did not come from Iran.
No, it came from Israel. It came from Israel.
Well, it came via Israel, but it came also from Qatar. So Iran wasn't paying for Hamas. Iran was paying for Islamic Jihad, which is a small group. It's not a significant group. And even then, there were other Arab countries who were contributing, other Arab financiers who were contributing. But if you're bombarded by this day and night, not just this year, but for the last 5, 6 years before October 2023, eventually this becomes fact for you. You don't check it.
Before we end this interview, Yasmin, anything that you would like to ask, anything that you would like to add, anything that you think is important right now and we didn't discuss it?
No, I just want to warn everyone about what they see on clips, on social media, on BBC, on CNN. They repeat what I call complete deliberate fake reels, fake audio, fake images, and they don't do fact check, because if it was, I don't know, if it was China, they would have done immediate fact check. They don't fact check it. And they put it out. It's in their interest. I think some foreign powers have made a decision. This is not just the Trump administration. I would say the Foreign Office in Britain, the British government, in their support for Israel, have made a decision that this is a good time for regime change. The Iranian people want regime change, but not the kind that the US and the British government and the French government have in mind. And we have therefore to be very wary of what they're showing and what ordinary people are telling us. There is a very big gap, and that gap isn't covered by media.
As I said before, never waste a good crisis. Yassamine Mather, it was my pleasure talking to you again, and I hope we can do this soon once the situation becomes a bit clearer.
Thank you very much, and apologies that I didn't have clear answers to some of your very good questions.
Very clear answers. Thank you again.